Hello, papery people of the internet. It's time for the final Paper Mario video. And today we'll be looking at Paper Mario and the Origami King for Nintendo Switch. We'll be looking at the game's gameplay, its difficulty, the content, and the game's story. So, I won't waste your time with any paper puns because they'll just fall flat. So we'll get right into the review of Paper Mario and the Origami King.
Let's go!
In Paper Mario Origami King, you take control as the Paper Paisano himself, and are tasked with saving an origamified Peach from the evil Origami King Ollie, who has been transforming the denizens of the Mushroom Kingdom into origami abominations. As you make your daring escape from Ollie, he wraps Peach's castle in 5 ribbons and places it high atop a distant mountain. And in order to save Peach and stop the origamification of the world, you must destroy the 5 ribbons and find the key to Peach's castle. This overarching story isn't anything to write home about, but it's good enough to get you going on your quest. Where the game really shines, though, is the return of the interconnected world and individual chapter areas. Yes, gone is that pesky world map and its disconnected levels from the previous Paper Mario games. And Paper Mario has finally returned to having an interconnected world where each area leads to the next without ever needing the convenience of some instant travel pipe or some magic portal. Just a few examples of this are the gondola that leads directly into the mountains behind Overlook Mountain, and the River Eddy from Chapter 2 that guides you right into Chapter 3's desert. This makes the world and story feel much more like a cohesive experience instead of just being a hodgepodge of these one-off levels that are kind of disconnected. I still wish you could walk directly to these chapter areas instead of all these different modes of transportation, but some chapters like Chapter 1 and Chapter 4 are immediately accessible from the main town, which gives me a little bit more hope for a more open-ended Paper Mario in the future. The best change this new world design brings is that levels are no longer simply a beeline to the finish in order to hit some kind of star block and proceed to the next area. Now we have large chapter areas with unique stories to explore. Thanks to this change, we get to enjoy various scenarios like becoming a treasure hunter of an ancient temple in a desert without a sun, and setting sail on the 7 seas to explore various islands in an attempt to find the keys to an ancient tower. And these chapters are full of interesting characters as well, like Bobby the Bob-Omb and Professor Toad, who despite having a very lame name is actually the most useful partner in the game. Each of these characters have some sort of motivation to joining Mario, ranging from, well, I got nothing better to do, to, I require your assistance to find the ancient ruins. And thanks to some character moments that I won't spoil, my new favorite Paper Mario partner of all time is Bobby the Bob-Omb. But getting back to the story itself of the game, I think my favorite chapter stories have got to be Chapter 6's Shangri Spa, if not only because of the awesomeness that is raiding Bowser's Castle, and Chapter 3 for having all the stellar character moments with Bobby, as well as an exciting mystery of unearthing the Toad Temple. So even though the game's overarching story isn't really too interesting, with Ollie kind of just sitting atop his tower waiting for you to come see him, it's got some awesome story moments in each of the individual chapters that drive me forward to save the princess once more. Let's go! Truly the most polarizing factor of any Paper Mario game is its gameplay. Fans of the original 2 titles clamor for the original Paper Mario styles, with badges, partners, and experience, while the more modern Paper Mario titles focus on some kind of gimmick and build their games around that, like stickers or paint. And on this scale, Origami King is smack dab in the middle. It's just slightly closer to modern Paper Mario, but Origami King also does a lot to bring back fan favorite aspects such as badges and partners, but only to a certain degree. You see, badges are now called accessories, and instead of using BP to equip, you can simply equip a limited number from each of these sections that are boxed off here. And most of these badges, while I appreciate their inclusion, do very little for making battles feel more involved, and instead aid your quest for collectibles in the overworld. And partners, while they are here in the game, are pretty much completely useless in battle. I mean, come on Bobby, just do something. Ah! On top of this, Origami King still avoids having an experience system, which means yet again, the only reward for battling is coins. Which out of all modern Paper Marios, I feel like Origami King deals with this the best, by giving players tons of things to spend their copious amounts of coins on, like collectible treasures, items, accessories, and even some key items that you need for the game. Some of these goods are ludicrously expensive to match your ludicrously deep pockets. And it wasn't until the end of the game that I felt like my coins started to have a little less value and didn't have much to spend it on other than the battles. So for me personally, I felt battles were worth it, but if you're the type not to really get all the collectibles and just kind of play through the game, they might drag on for a bit longer since you don't really have much you want to spend your coins on. And if they would have had a few more accessories and item types to buy instead of just collectibles, that would have done a lot more to improve the motivation to do battles, because you could have gotten a lot more interesting rewards instead of just a trophy that doesn't really do anything gameplay-wise. But let's talk about the battle system. The ring battles, a new innovative way to battle enemies. Which, can I just say, it's a huge bummer I can't do ring battles with my ring con? Huge missed opportunity, Nintendo. At first, I liked this idea a lot. Trying to figure out how to line up enemies was tricky, yet satisfying. But around the time that coins started to lose their value, the puzzles began to feel more tedious than satisfying, and I would just spend the 1,000 coins so my toad friends would solve it for me. I feel like the game would have really benefited by saving these ring battles for a few special encounters and instead filled the map with maybe more of these paper macho enemies. But before I completely write myself off as a ring battle hater, let me just say that I love all the boss fights that use this system. Because instead of lining up the enemies, you now have to line up a path of arrows that allows Mario to approach the boss and get in range of doing damage. But arrows aren't the only thing on these rings. There's health, coins, treasure chests, double damage tiles, double attack tiles, hints on beating the boss, go buttons that activate magic circles, and the magic circles themselves that use special abilities to beat the boss. So, this has way more going for it than any normal ring battle, and all these unique spaces force you to not simply make a straight path, but wind through all these pickups to get the most out of each turn. And even though the boss designs are generally pretty lame, oh no, it's tape! Each boss has abilities that mix up the ring battles, like lighting panels on fire, freezing panels, or even taping panels together so you can't rotate them the way you want to. Each one is a joy to solve, and they serve as a great finale for each chapter. But that's not all for the combat of Origami King, as it also features another type of boss battles called Paper Macho Battles. In Paper Macho Battles, you fight these gigantic enemies in the overworld, and you have to whack their ollie stickers in order to damage them. Each encounter was amazing, but with so few of them in the game, only 3 across the entire game, it definitely left me wanting more. Which got me thinking, why does Origami King try these 2 different styles of combat, both the overworld real-time combat for Paper Macho and the turn-based ring combat system? I kinda wish the game would simply choose one and go crazy with it. With ring battles, we could really use some more weapon types, as there's really only 2 types: the hammer that hits in a 2x2 square, and the jump attack that attacks in a line. Every other item in the game falls into one of these categories, except for the POW block, which hits everything, and it's limited to 3 for some reason in your inventory. Why? With more unique and maybe rarer attacks, it would have allowed for more unique situations in the ring puzzles, which might have helped them drag on a little less. And for Paper Macho battles, where do I even begin? There are tons of Paper Macho enemies that aren't bosses, but the game treats them like one-and-done occurrences as they get introduced in their area, and then they're just never seen again. And with only 3 Paper Macho bosses, I can't help but feel like there's so much untapped potential. I would honestly love to see how a Paper Mario game would turn out if they just ditched turn-based battles entirely and ran with the overworld real-time combat. I can't help but get excited about intelligent systems doing something entirely original, like Super Paper Mario. The game would be very different than the Paper Mario from before, but would at least be able to stand on its own merits instead of being a shadow of what it once was. But enough about wishy-washy battle systems. Let's dig into the wonderful world of Origami King. And I should note that each chapter is still split up into areas so you can track all the collectibles, but this hardly detracts from how seamlessly the world all fits together. Because as I mentioned before, Paper Mario at last is allowed to have these wide sprawling areas where the game just lets you loose to explore, like the massive desert in Chapter 3 and the wide seas of Chapter 4. This kind of level design gives so much more agency to the player and that feeling of adventure. Discovering secrets feels so much better when you're not led by the nose to them and instead have the freedom to discover them yourself. I really hope they keep this up in newer Paper Mario games, because some of the world design in these chapters is even better than the chapters in classic Paper Mario. Alright, it's Nintendo. You know, the game can't be too hard, and really, it isn't. Enemies rarely damage you unless you can't solve the ring puzzle on your first turn, and even if you do mess up, sometimes they just fall over. The only real challenge comes from the bosses, who if you're not careful, can have some insane damage output if you play them wrong. Or, they'll just have this one-shot move that'll kill you immediately. Which brings me into my biggest problem with modern Paper Mario games: instant deaths. Introduced in Color Splash, Paper Mario now has a few scripted scenes where you can save just before them, and if you script the execution in any way, you get sent straight to the game over screen. And now there are even floor hazards that kill you instantly, like lava? I'm fine with hazards doing huge damage, but at least let me heal if I just barely nicked my toe into the lava. These deaths feel cheap, and the games would really benefit just by removing them entirely. But worry not, it's not all bleak in the difficulty department, as the game truly has some tough challenges in the form of optional side quests, such as the ringer and speed rings, that really push your skill of solving ring puzzles to the max. And lastly, for the true challenge seekers out there, there's even a challenge run you can do where you play through the game with no game overs and using no accessories, and the game will recognize this feat by giving you a little stamp on the menu. Not a lot, but a nice little touch. With 6 ribbons to be freed and 7 worlds to explore, this game is nowhere short on content. And on top of the main story, there's also the museum to be filled out with all the little things you do throughout the game, like filling in confetti holes and finding hidden blocks and toads! So many toads! This is a toad, that is a toad, this bug is a toad, that's also a toad, everything's a toad!
I'm a toad!
They're pretty much this game's version of Korok seeds, and are a joy to find even if there are so many of them. But no need to be overwhelmed by these collectibles, since the game will track them for you in each area with a percentage, and there are items that help you track how close you are to a collectible. And the game will also reward you for doing all these little tasks, like getting a sound gallery for filling in all the confetti holes, and getting the concept art for the game for collecting toads, which I think is the best reward. And for other content, if you really want to go for 100%, there are all these little side quests to keep you busy, which will usually reward you with some kind of HP up heart or a collectible trophy.
So long,
First up, story. So overall, the story of Paper Mario Origami King was pretty generic, but with some extraordinary individual chapter stories and some expressive character moments, I have to give the game a 7 out of 10. Next up is gameplay, the most decisive point of any Paper Mario game. And while the ring battles dragged on a little longer than they should have, the ring boss battles and the Paper Macho battles were delightful throughout. And while I wish they would have focused on one form of combat instead of 2, I still enjoyed it through the whole way. So normally I'd give it a 7 out of 10, but thanks to exploration also being added into the mix for gameplay, with those wide sprawling areas to explore and hundreds of toads to collect and treasures galore, I'd have to give it an 8 out of 10. Next up is difficulty. And it's pretty much what you'd expect from your standard Mario fare. It's a pretty easy game throughout, with some little difficulty spikes for the completionist that wants to go the extra mile. But thanks to some cheap deaths that make the game feel a little artificial and unfair, I'm gonna have to give it a 7 out of 10. And lastly, we have content. And to be fair, I was a little worried about this one, since there are only 6 chapters in this game, and I felt like it might not be able to live up to the expectations of Paper Mario 64 and TTYD with 8 chapters in the game. But thanks to a wealth of collectibles to find, like treasures, toads, HP up hearts, enemies to fight, and the little coffee stands that are somewhere off there, there was plenty to do in these chapters, and they kept me entertained the whole way out. And when I finished, I felt like the game had been a pretty good length, but an extra chapter or 2 would never hurt. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. So overall, I really enjoyed my time with Paper Mario Origami King. And even though I thought it was flawed at some points, like the cheap deaths, and partners not really doing what I expected, and accessories not being nearly as good as badges, I thought it was a good game in its own right. And it's a good direction for the series to go in the future. Although I hope they really expand on the ideas that they put down here, and really just try to push forward with one style of combat in the future, instead of splitting the game into 2, because I feel like it weakens the potential of the combat just a little bit. So, whether you're a fan of new Paper Mario or old Paper Mario, this game has something for you in it. And I gotta give Paper Mario Origami King a 7.5 out of 10. And while it's not the best Paper Mario game in the series, I definitely think it's a great game to try out on Nintendo Switch.
Thank you guys so much for watching my review on Paper Mario and the Origami King. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Sorry this video took a little bit longer than the other ones. I've been adjusting to moving to Chicago. So now that I'm in my new place, hopefully I'll be able to get back to making videos and content that I love and that you guys love too. Thanks again guys, and I will see you later.